Yeah, and so it is those layers of questions. And then the other kinds of things is that senior leaders think they know their organization, and by and large, many of them do,
Mm-hmm.
but they don't know if there's 1,500 people in the organization, what a particular group or part of the organization is thinking about, or a particular location.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes they don't want to hear, and lots of what you hear in research and consultations is you hear issues. You don't hear the great things. When you ask people what's happening, and and you do a SWOT kind of analysis, everyone wants to jump to the negative. I can't park, I don't get paid enough, I don't like my manager. And so if you don't manage those conversations, and you don't ask and you ask the kind of questions that get results that you can deal with, you end up in a morass of,
Well, it's the kind of internet comments kind of situation of doing focus groups or of doing kind of large community consultations, right? Is you get the people who have something to say, and people who really want to say it, who come out. Sometimes it's positive, sometimes it's negative. But however it's phrased, there is some useful information in there. So I think that's sometimes why it's useful to have kind of that level of consultation between senior leadership and kind of community engagement, or between staff and students and different focus groups, is because when you're seeing these consistent themes, you can make it a bit more palatable, interesting, synthesized kind of session of information, because sometimes there's people who have really valid complaints, and sometimes there's people who have had the same complaint for 20 years that hasn't been resolved for a reason. So it's interesting to take that kind of level and quantity of information and to try and put it into form and format that's really useful.
And we have had clients tell us that we do larger processes. We talk to more people, we do more online surveys, we do focus groups, we do we use a range of methods. Just why, I'm interested from a research point of view about why that's important.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of reasons. The first is, when we're trying to do that level of work, the more information you can get, the better. So we want to make sure we're providing everyone an opportunity to take part. And some people, because if you're just doing focus groups, for example, there's usually a certain kind of characteristic or profile of people who are going to show up to a focus group. And that's fine. That's great. We want to hear from those people. And if they want to voice their concerns in that way, then we'll listen to them, and we'll definitely hear it and, get that sort of information. There might be different people who respond to an online questionnaire, or there might be some people who have really important information about the kind of the organization, but are more comfortable on a one-on-one basis. So we might do a private or confidential interview, or talk with a small team who has very different kind of interests or experience or knowledge than we might get at a large focus group. It's good to have those different forums, because there's a lot of information that might be a bit sensitive, or there might be people who aren't comfortable providing their information, especially if we're new or we're external to the organization and people aren't sure about where the information is going to go or how it's going to be used. It's really important that we can explain how and why we're doing it, and how that information is going to be used. But for those kind of things where we want to get information and give people opportunities to participate from as broad of a range of the kind of stakeholders and community in the organization as possible, we want to make sure there's as many forums available as possible. Because what we don't want to do is miss an entire section of the community because they don't respond well to these type of requests or this type of communication or something like that. So getting that kind of broad and diverse representation is really important. From a research perspective, the more data we can get, the better. The more people who respond, the more confident we are that it represents the whole community instead of just a certain section of it. So there's a whole bunch of reasons to do that. But what we want to do is, when we're giving advice and we're making recommendations, is to be as confident as we can that it's representing the broadest range of people. And, sometimes different groups are going to have different priorities and different focuses, and it may be about explaining that and kind of synthesizing and explaining that data in the way that it's occurring. But if we don't want to leave people out, essentially.
Yeah. And, sort of just as we wind up kind of the conversation, I keep thinking about trust. And I have had clients tell me over the years that because We are very precise about sort of the qualitative, quantitative, making sure that we hear from the groups that not only do the senior leadership or whoever happens to be contracting or employing us trust us, but the people in the process trust that we're doing the best we can to get their information into the strategic plan and help form the results.
Yeah, and it's so important, but you really have to demonstrate it and build that trust. Because we've had times in the process too where even after doing months of consultations and surveys and focus groups, even after that process has gone through and we've spoken to or heard from hundreds or even thousands of people, we still get a few people who trickle in at the end, or some people who either didn't know or have heard from some other people about the process and say they will actually listen to you. And we'll sometimes get that information even after we thought we've asked everyone and talked to everyone and been to every community and every campus. We'll still get a few people who have some insight that we didn't see from originally.
Well, it's interesting that you say that. I'm involved in a process right now, and I just got a call because I was in a community, and it's always a challenge to see everyone. And I got a call asking me if I could come back because I have some more things to say.
Oh, yeah.
I can't. I did some things on the telephone, but it's just an interesting thing because they said, we hear you really listen to people, so we'd like to talk to you too.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people do approach it a bit skeptically, and they think, oh, well, they're doing this focus group, but is it going to go anywhere? And they may have had experiences where people have done surveys or, done something else, and they didn't feel that their feedback was listened to or that it went anywhere. So even as part of that process, you have to do everything you can to build up that trust and to say, this is where we're going to use it. This is who we're going to present it to. If you think of anything else, here's the forum you can kind of approach us or approach someone else to do that. But really making sure that everyone knows that what they provide is going to be kind of valued and actually acted on is so important.